Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me for this Mary Washington Regional Coach Call. For those of you that I have yet to meet face to face at a tournament this year or years past, my name is Emily Owens, and I'm the State Director for Virginia Science Olympiad. Our goal tonight is to get ready for the University of Mary Washington National Ready Regional that we're having on March 1st. And so here's our agenda for the evening. We are going to look at kind of two segments of what's going on. First, your preparations in advance for tournament day, things that you need to keep in mind, specifically to get done before making our way to Fredericksburg on March 1st. And then the other part of it, the bulk of it will really be about the tournament day itself. So some reminders for those of you that are veteran coaches, some helpful information for those of you that are new coaches, and hopefully getting what you need to share with your teams before March 1st. So first, event supervisors. Thank you so much for providing your event supervisor submissions way back before winter break. The selected event supervisors had received an email from me in January, and they actually should have received one again from me today because I had to send out their lunch orders to them. If you are unsure of what event supervisors your team has, you can see those in your coach portal. So you can double check that and make sure that you're also keeping in contact with that person so that they know what to expect, like expect an email from us, expect to be there representing your team, etc. Our event group leaders will be in contact with them probably at the beginning of next week to confirm logistics, including things like copies, who's making them, whether it's us or them, important materials, check-in info, etc. So they should hear from them, like I said, at the beginning of next week. There's not a whole lot of prep that we expect of them if people are asking, but it is kind of nice to just orient them a little bit to their specific events. If they're build event supervisors, though, they've already been contacted by our engineering event coordinators, Karen and Ian. They were offered live virtual training, and we have videos that we've shared with them. So they did have a little bit more involved with that. And then the other events, we have a general event supervisor training video on our resources page and a chemistry additional training video. And you can watch those too, if especially if you're new to Science Olympiad or just kind of curious. Like you can see what I say to event supervisors if you would find that helpful. So those are on the resources page on our website or on our YouTube channel. Volunteers, thank you guys so much for getting your volunteers signed up. I think we're like 10 spots away from having all the volunteer shifts covered for Mary Washington, which is great. So if you are still looking for volunteers to fill the ask for your team, just remember this could be parents, this could be coaches, whether you or assistant coaches, this can be community members. Just send them to the volunteer portal to sign up. And we thank everyone who volunteers on tournament day so much. It makes running these tournaments possible for us. Without them we can't do this kind of in-person work. VASO itself as a board is a contingent of less than 10 people, and so it takes a large network to make this happen. So thank you so much. If they are still looking to sign up, please have them sign up for Mary Washington volunteering. I think the only other one that's open still is Fairfax. The volunteers part of the checklist is actually like the first item that's on the checklist. And I just wanted to remind you that the coach checklist is out there. It exists. It's there for you to use, and has some of these like key things to check off before tournament day and some key reminders of things like our resources page, event pages, clarifications, etc. Question in the chat, how many volunteers are required per team for the Mary Washington Regional? So it depends. Like it's by school, whether you have like one, two, or three teams. I think you could see it in the portal. It's somewhere between like 2 to 4. So would definitely take a look at that on your portal page. You can see actually all your volunteers that have signed up, and there's a count for you there. So I think it's 2 for your school. Okay. One of those other items on the checklist that's super important is rosters. So all students have to have that permission form filled out on our VASO website. This is just the VASO permission form. Your school may also require additional permission forms for this being a field trip. That's different. The VASO permission form is an online form completed by their parent or guardian. You can then see who has completed these forms on the VASO coach portal. If they've done it, they show up in a list for you so that you can assign them to teams. So if they don't have a permission form, they can't be put on a roster, and that means they cannot compete. Rosters are due this Friday, February 21st at 5 p.m. And so you're going to complete these by assigning students to your team rosters. If you go to the portal, on the tab that says create your teams and click on that, there's two things that you can do on that page. One is you can change your team names. If you haven't already done so, we love to see creative team names. There's some fun ones this year that I've seen already at this tournament. So you can do that. You can click into the box for the team name and edit them as you'd like. And then below that, you're going to see the list of students that you can assign to your teams. There's a column that says regional team, and it should have just blank boxes. If you click on the blank box for a student, it will then come up with this menu that says edit regional team. You can then select which regional team to put them on. Even if you only have one team, you do need to do this to put the students on the teams. You may have had extra students sign up, you may have changes, but you need to put them on a roster. It does keep account for you of how many you've got on a team, and if you're a C team, the number of seniors that you have, since the maximum is 7. So again, please get those done by Friday at 5 p.m. Our wonderful volunteer who puts together the wristband packets uses them for weekend time to print them. And it's a bunch of stickers that have to go on, hundreds of wristbands. So thank you in advance for getting that done by Friday. There's also a new thing that we ask you to do in the portal this year, which is to tell us if you're coming to the tournament. So please let us know which coaches are coming for your school. There has to be at least one that has a portal account that's indicated yes. Only coaches that have portal accounts and that have said yes, they're coming to regionals will be issued wristbands on tournament day. So if you are part of a team that has more than one coach, please make sure that any coaches that you would like to have wristbands and the ability to submit appeals or talk to VASO personnel, they need to have an account, and then they need to indicate yes that they will be there at regionals. Okay. This is not for like all your event mentors or anything like that. This is really just for like the head coach and an assistant coach, the one or two people that are going to be representing your team and, speaking to VASO on the team's behalf. So if that's also like, if you're not going to be there as the head coach, that's okay. But then you just need to have, whatever adult is school endorsed that will be there in your stead, needs to have their own portal account, and then we'll get them a wristband. Build event sign up is something that I know many of you have already done on the portal as well. It is open now. And so teams can only sign up if they have fulfilled their volunteer requirement. If you have not yet done that, then that feature is closed to you until those volunteers are provided. If you don't sign up, teams can't compete in device testing. Okay, so really important, those volunteers will actually close on Wednesday. And then the build event sign up closes Friday at 7:30 a.m. This gives us time to print the schedules of who all is going to be there, get our event supervisors ready for the sessions that they're going to have. So you have until Friday at 7:30 a.m. to sign up or make any changes if space allows. Please make sure you're paying attention to student conflicts when you sign up for these. Don't double book a student that's supposed to be taking an astronomy test at the same time you've said they're going to test their air trajectory device. Especially for a tournament this large, it's going to be really difficult for us to make changes and squeeze teams in if errors like that occur. So try to be mindful of that as you're scheduling in advance. And we especially won't move the written tests to accommodate those builds. Just so that you can see what it looks like on the portal, the button that you'd be clicking to schedule device testing says schedule device testing. You have to do it for each of your teams if you have more than one at your school. So it'll give you the option to pick which team and then to pick which sessions, space allowing for your given events. So it's not required that all of your teams compete in a build event at the same session. You'll pick per team. Yes, the build event sign up closes the Friday before competition. So yes, February 28th. Yes. Yeah, sorry. The view you see here is just from like a test account. So don't ignore those dates. I should have like blurred them out to avoid confusion. The dates in your portal are correct. All right, some other things that you should probably keep in mind to do before tournament day. Share the event schedule with team members and families. Um, just make sure they know where to find it. But in particular, I would encourage you to like make your own version of it, right? You can then indicate when your builds are happening for your individual teams so that they're aware of that. You can of course then add in your own expectations about like what time you expect them to be there or if they're not traveling with you. Key reminders for certain students and families about like which events require impound, and we will talk more about impound. But we make the schedules as Google spreadsheets for a reason now so that you can, copy them. The rooms are not yet in the spreadsheet, but that should happen in the next day or so. We were just finalizing some changes, but I have some information about where all the events are going to be, and I have a map. We'll talk about that too. I would also encourage you to just kind of check in with your students about making sure they have their necessary materials. Not that that falls on you, but that you're prompting them to think about it, especially like their cheat sheets, making sure they've built a device, any logs that they have. I would say my preference as a coach was always to at least have the personal protective equipment part of it live with me so that I could know that they were going to have goggles that were safe and they were going to have lab aprons. But you decide what's best for you and your team with how you're going to, what you're going to provide versus what you're telling your students they need to bring with them. For any event, they should be double checking their rules and the VASO clarifications to make sure that they have the correct equipment and materials on tournament day. And so if you're like a Division B coach, this might be a conversation that you have more as a team. You could build it into an activity of like going over the rules once again to make sure like everyone understands what they're allowed to bring. Again, just kind of whatever works for you and you and your school. Okay, question in the chat. If a student couldn't make it to their scheduled build event, could they show up and ask ES to include them? Potential, I mean, they can always ask. So we'll talk a little bit more about builds. There is some flexibility with how you like what students run the builds. But they can always ask. It just doesn't mean that it can necessarily be accommodated since we do have a full tournament. But that's an option. Okay, and especially because this tournament is travel for pretty much everybody, please make sure that families know how to contact you throughout the day. Um, and anything else that your school requires of you for those like field trip travel events. Okay, so I know we're gonna have tons of questions about the actual tournament day, but is there anything else in advance, like the prep questions, that people would like to ask right now?
Hi,
Also, I
Ellie.
love that you guys are such good students because someone's already made a coach account and asked for me to approve it while we've been on this call because they listened. Okay, I think there was a question.
Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to remember. Okay, with making the build teams or all the teams, so like my kids are slowly putting in their permission slips. I can, do I assign them to all their events or is that automatic? I'm sorry, I'm new and I'm just trying to figure all this out.
No, no, so you're good. So you do not have to tell VASO what events students are doing.
Okay.
So all you're doing is just putting them on a roster and just saying, here are the 15 students from my team.
Okay.
After that, like you keep track of who's in what events, but there's not a place that you have to upload that information to us.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then also, it looks like our two teams, we have 5 volunteers now. So, you said there's still 10 short. Because both
Yes.
myself and the other coach took a volunteer spot because we were nervous no one was going to volunteer. Um, so I mean, we'll have other parents there. There's not going to be a coach at like home base. Is that okay?
So I would say based you should follow whatever like your school's directives are about like whether there needs to be like what adult is in charge
Okay.
of the students that are there. Um, it's certainly helpful for there to be a coach with the students, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about a little bit more why that is, because if you're it in an event volunteering or supervising, it makes it harder for you to do some of the tasks that you may have to do on behalf of your team.
Okay.
But if you need to make a swap, like if there's a parent who's going to take your place for a volunteer event, you can still do that in the portal. Or like the parent can sign up and then, you could email me and I could swap them. We also
Okay.
do allow day of swaps, but then we have a coordinator on site that you talk to. So I
Okay.
encourage you to find a way to definitely have a coach there, like
Mhm.
someone who's going to wear the purple wristband.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if we need to use an alternate, how do we do that? So we'll talk a little bit about that because that'll be involved with check-in, and we'll also talk about home bases, which is one of the other questions in the chat. So it sounds like we're good with the prep questions. Let's talk about tournament day. So, like I said, the rooms are not populated yet in the schedule, and this is the Division B schedule, but you can see we have a very full day ahead of us with these 30 team regionals in each division. So from 7:30 to probably AM, probably to PM with the award ceremony, that's what we're looking at with our day. So first thing in the morning, 7:30 is check-in. Coaches are expected to arrive at the beginning of the day so that you can check in with us. Check-in is going to be in the Anderson Center, which is where the UMW basketball team plays. That's also where the home base is for everybody. Okay, so we'll have a table in the front there, right by where you're going to enter into the arena part for the team spaces. And you'll be able to then get your coach packet from us. And so then from there, you'll be able to meet with your students to give them the wristbands, which is really the key piece of info in the packet. So individual students and parents do not check in with Vaso. They check in with you as coaches, but the coach checks in on behalf of the whole team with us. So during that check-in process, we're going to ask you to verify your rosters, verify your count of students. This is the time where if you do need to make a change in a roster, like let's say a student suddenly can't make it or was sick or something like that, and you have another student you're going to swap, this is the time where you would do that. So we don't designate alternates for regional tournaments, but if you have a different kid to swap in, you can do that when you check in and say, hey, I need to change this kid. They need to have their student permission form done though, because I can't make that swap in the system unless they've filled that in. And then you're going to have wristbands for you as coaches and then for all of your students. Students are not required to have them on if they're going to impound. So they do not need the wristbands for impound. However, probably just based on the flow when you see it on the map, they're probably going to come to you first anyway. To get and then they can get their wristbands. But as soon as you see them, you should make sure that your students wear those wristbands, secure them on their wrists, and have them for the duration of the day. Mary Washington, as a public university, does have public maps available. And so we will also have a couple copies, but these are things that you can access on your own as well, unlike when we have them at, regional high schools that don't publish maps. And so this is what we're working with UMW. So there are 4 main buildings that are going to be our focus. So number 4 on this map is the Anderson Center. This is where all the teams will be. So you'll note that there's a parking lot directly like below number 4 on this map. That I believe is the best place for buses. I would actually encourage that it's not where personal vehicles should go. It's a much better access point for personal vehicles to be in the parking deck, which is like that number 6. There's actually like a bridge that directly connects, so you can walk directly from the parking deck pretty much to the like Anderson Center like building complex there. Okay, so there should be plenty of parking. We didn't really have a problem with it at all in years past. So that is my suggestion for people traveling. But buses, that front lot by Anderson, in front of Anderson Center, will work. Number 5 is Gulrick Gym, and that's where almost all of the build events are going to be. I think the exceptions are Mission Possible, which will be in a room with tables. And then Bungee Drop will be in a different building. So all the other builds, though, will happen in Gulrick Gym. Number 13 is the Convergence Center. That is where Bungee Drop will happen. They have a nice little like multi-story like lobby. And it's also where Vaso headquarters will be and scoring if you're an event supervisor. And then the big one, actually, where probably the students will spend most of their competition time is number 9, which is the Jepson Science Center. So all of the written tests and all of the chemistry lab events will be in the Jepson Science Center. I know it's kind of hard to have like perspective on how long of a distance you're walking here, but it's literally like a 10-second walk from the Anderson Center to the Jepson Science Center. So they are very, very close to each other. If you stood in the center there where it says Campus Walk, you could easily see and call out to anybody at any of those buildings. It's pretty convenient and close by. Okay. So hopefully that will make the day a little smoother since we're able now to put everything pretty much into Jepson Science Center. I think our plans last year had us going to a different building, but Jepson Science Center has now accommodated some awesome lab rooms that have a lot more of those like flat tables. And so we're excited that we can fit everybody in there. Okay, so you come to Anderson Center, you get your wristbands and your coach packet. So a reminder then that like that's the only time that you have to check in with us on tournament day. However, we require that there is a school representative on site for the duration of the team's presence. And we assume that is the head coach unless we hear otherwise. Okay, so you as the head coach should be there, should be reachable by phone or email for the duration of the tournament. And if that's not going to be you, then we need to know who it is. We need to have that indicated in the coach portal and have a wristband. Okay. And as I mentioned, wristbands are not required for impound, but if they're already going to be passing through Anderson Center, I would slap those wristbands on those kids when you can before they run off other places. But they will not bar them from impounding if they don't have it. Okay. We'll talk more about impound and then the parameters around that. Now, a little bit more about those wristbands and what they're going to look like for those of you that have not competed in Science Olympiad before. So you as a coach are going to get a wristband. It'll have your name. It'll say your school. It'll say that you're a coach. And it's also purple. It's a different color wristband from everybody else at the tournament. So we'll know when we see those purple wristbands, yes, you are a school-approved person. You are someone that Vaso people can talk to. You are representing the team. For your students, each of your teams will have a different color of wristband, and each wristband will have a sticker on it that has the student name, their school and team name, and then their team number. So the team number is especially helpful if you've gone to a variety of invitationals. Sometimes they don't remember what their team numbers are. But it does also mean that you have to pay attention to which stickers are on it. So the stickers are already placed, but if someone's on, team C107, the Wahoos, don't just hand out the wristbands without looking at them to all the Wahoos. They are specific to each student. Okay. So even though Ryan and Chris in this example go to the same school, they will have different colored wristbands because they're on different teams. They should expect that event supervisors are going to ask to see their wristbands when they come to a session and to check that that Ryan is partnering with someone who has the same color wristband and Chris is partnering with a different person who has a different colored wristband. So it's also then a good reminder, like I said, of like what their team numbers are. But please pay attention, sorry, to the names on them and make sure they get on the right students. All right. At the start of the tournament, we ask you to like check your rosters and check your wristbands to make sure that you have the right number. And that's really important because we take it seriously that like we want to make things as fair as possible. We want to make sure that there's only 15 students competing for a given team maximum. And so the wristbands are part of the way we do that. And so if you come to us later and say, "Oh, I was missing a wristband," I'm going to need to hear a little bit more about that because you should have checked them in or checked them when I gave you the rosters initially. Or if a student loses a wristband, then they have to come with you to headquarters to find me to tell me what happened. Okay. If they just like broke their wristband, please have them keep the wristband and then they can just bring it to us and we'll replace it. If they have the wristband to replace, then that makes it a lot easier. Okay. But if the wristband is lost, then we're going to have more of a conversation and I have to decide if I believe the story. Um, Along with that, if you have students who are going to be like popping in and out during the day, like they have a morning event and they're going somewhere else and coming back later for an afternoon event, just make sure that their parents know that they should not be taking the wristband off. Okay. It should be secure enough that they can't slide it off, but obviously not too tight that it's going to like hurt them. But I will forever remember having to listen to, I think it was a fifth grader at the Centerville Regional last year explain that the reason why he lost his wristband is because he had a basketball game and it was uncomfortable. And so he took it off and then lost it at the basketball game. So, um, at the very least, have them keep it so they can get a replacement. I mentioned already that the Anderson Center is where all the teams are going to have their home bases. It's just like I said, a very short walk from Jepson, so it really is the most convenient for everybody. Please tell students and parents to be respectful of other teams' belongings, their devices, and their like claimed space. It is helpful to have a coach or at least a knowledgeable adult in the home base area during the tournament so we can easily find you if we have questions, if we have to talk to you about an appeal, something like that. So many of you are signed up to volunteer or be event supervisors, and that's totally fine. If you have an assistant coach, it's great if they're able to be in the home base area. If you don't have that, please just make sure that the adults that are there like understand their role as, you know, like being in charge of the team and also then like know where you are so that like they can direct us to find you if we need you. Okay. So it's totally fine for coaches to volunteer or to be event supervisors. It's just like making sure the people you're, you know, leaving in charge know what that means. One of those main components is making sure that people clean up after themselves, especially in a large shared space like the Anderson Center. Really important that people are mindful of their trash. We do give a trash bag in the coach packets at check-in. Um, but this also actually applies to even their events as well. So we can assess a penalty if teams don't clean up after themselves. That could be in a given event. Let's say they don't clean up after themselves in forensics. They could be penalized in their score for that. Or if they just don't clean up their like team area, they can be penalized. So please pass along the message that they should, you know, be good Girl Scouts and leave the place cleaner than they found it. And, you know, we want Mary Washington to keep welcoming us back. The gym floor itself of the Anderson Center will not be open for use. So it's not like an open gym space. Like that will actually be like blocked off. All the team members are going to be in the stands. And so there's two sides of the Anderson Center. One has bleachers and the other has chairs with backs. So just would encourage the adults or really anybody to think about if you have that like travel stadium seating, you're more than welcome to bring it. That's a long time to sit in bleachers. Spaces will not be like necessarily assigned in the Anderson Center, so when you get there, you know, your team can claim a space, but just be mindful of the fact that we have 59 teams that are going to be in the area. And, you know, once the day gets going, for those of you that are veteran coaches, you know that there's like not really a lot of people like hanging out in the home base space. So we don't need to spread out and claim, you know, 3 whole rows for a team. There are, of course, like the Jepson Center does have some very limited seating in the halls. And there are other areas of campus. It shouldn't be too busy on campus. I believe it's the start of their spring break. But so just know that like there are other places they can sit, but like parents should not be expecting to like be able to sit outside of event rooms in Jepson Center. There's not enough space for all of that. Okay, let's talk about impound. So after you've got wristbands on your kids, or at least claimed a space in Anderson Center, you've got your coach packet. Now it's 8 o'clock and it's impound. There are 3 impound events for each division at this tournament since we are running all 23 events in each division here. And so in Division B, that is Air Trajectory, Mission Possible, and Scrambler. Division C is Air Trajectory, Electric Vehicle, and Robot Tour. So what impound means is that members of the team will bring their device and any other required items, as explained by the rules, to be turned in to the event supervisors, and they hold onto it at the event supervisor space until their device testing block. The reason we do this for these particular events is that there's information about those events, like distances or like Robot Tour's course or things like that, that are not shared until testing begins. And we don't want teams that go in later sessions to have an advantage from having more time to practice with that known information. So impound is really, really important. And failure to impound results in massive penalties. So please make sure that your students who are bringing the devices know for those events that they have to impound them. Oh, is Bungie also? Yeah, sorry, I missed it on my list. That's what I get for putting the Division B schedule and not C up there. I will fix that in the slides I send out to you guys. Thanks, Lindsay. Okay. So please make sure that your students read the rules to know everything that has to be impounded with their device. So that, they don't have to impound their goggles, but like they might have to impound their device log if that's something that's required, any tools they plan to use with the device. Each event has it spelled out very clearly in the top part of their rules page. But one thing that's not written that they need to bring is a writing utensil. We do need to like have them fill out on a piece of paper, like what school they are, and their student names, so we can leave that with the device so we know whose is whose. Okay, whether it's an impound event or not, the device testing part itself, you're signing up for a general session block, but just know that the device testing is only going to take about like 15 minutes. So there's not like a set order for teams in the same block. The event supervisor will likely ask if any teams want to go first. It also means like there is a little bit of like grace period that like if your team is running just a few minutes late, then they might be able to then like not be called first. It just depends on the session. Mission Possible is a key exception to this, that they really do like they're going to use a good chunk of the time because of their setup time and then their run time. So that takes longer than 15 minutes, and they should expect to be there for most of the block for that one. But the testing for other events is going to include some discussion, some questions from the event supervisor, measurements of the device if that's necessary, and then actually the task itself. So your students should be prepared to speak to the adult running the session knowledgeably about their device and answer any questions. Doug, I see your hand is up.
Hi, yes. So just a question about sign up, maybe 2 questions. So we're talking about signups for testing right now, device testing, okay? Which I see that in the coaches portal for selecting times. That's a coach responsibility, not a student responsibility?
Yes, unless your students have a student leadership account in the portal.
Okay. And then second, there is an area within the portal for students to go sign up for their actual build event time slot. No.
No, students don't log into the portal at all unless they have a
Okay.
student leadership account, and we don't need to know which students are doing which events.
Okay. Nope. Just need to, so probably the next VASA meeting or Science Olympiad meeting, start getting all this filled out. So got it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, when they return for their device testing, if they've left their device in impound, then when they arrive at the test session, the event supervisor will let them get it out of impound. Or if it wasn't an impound event, like let's say it's tower, they should be making sure they're bringing their device and materials with them during their testing block. They should also bring their appropriate safety equipment. Not every event requires goggles, but like tower definitely does. And there are others. So make sure that they, are aware of what they need to bring with them. For pretty much all the builds, and I realize I left Bungie off this list too. Sorry, I just wasn't thinking about that. Device testing for all of those builds, air trajectory, helicopter, electric vehicle, Mission Possible, Robot Tour, Scrambler Tower, and Bungee Drop. These will be open to viewing by parents, coaches, and other spectators. There's no other events during the day that are going to be open for viewing. That includes wind power, that includes optics, so they are not open for viewing. Okay, so if you have a parent of a student who is doing optics and forensics and fossils, there's not going to be much for them to see, and so maybe they can do some other volunteer duties for your team while they are there supporting their student. Speaking of goggles, please make sure that your students are aware of the type of goggles they have to have. So for our build events, we're pretty much looking at the category B goggles. This chart or list is found in the rule book. The category B goggles are the high impact safety rated goggles. They have to have a rating that says Z87 plus on them in order to be used in those build events like Tower. So make sure they've got the correct kind. If you're providing the goggles like from your school, then chances are they have that rating, but you can check that yourself. If your team members are providing their own goggles, especially for like Division B, I would encourage you to have them bring them to like the next practice so you can all like check them together to make sure they're the right kind. A little bit more about devices. So devices have to be constructed only by members of the 15 student team that is submitting it. And there's a couple like instances where this is like very, very important for coaches to keep in mind. So first is if you have more than one team, you need to make sure that each device is only built by the individual team, not a collective of all the teams of your school. So let's say your teams have been working on air trajectory. They can talk about ideas, but the actual building of the device for team A needs to be done by only members of team A, and team B's device only by members of team B. They can't like cross over and help construct each other's devices. Okay, so that's the first thing to keep in mind. Second thing is the implication of students dropping out at the last minute, being sick, etc. Let's say I have a student who can no longer make it to the tournament, and they were a key builder on my Mission Possible device. If they're no longer coming to the tournament, but you leave them on the roster, that's okay then for their partner to still submit and test their device. Okay. However, if you intend to replace that student on your roster with an alternate on the day of the tournament, you no longer can use that device in competition. Okay. So if you remove a builder from the roster, any device that they helped build is ineligible for competition. So think really carefully about roster changes the day of the tournament if you do have students who bow out at the last minute if they're builders. Okay. Other things to keep in mind, mentors, whether that's parents, coaches, teachers, whoever, cannot have constructed any part of any device for any team. That's completely prohibited. They can, of course, have trained students to use the tools or oversee them, but they can't do anything for them. And so it is expected that no matter the age group of the students, the device has been designed so that the students can build it safely themselves. If there were steps that students could not safely do, they could try to find someone else on the actual, on their student team who does know how to do that task, or they have to find a different way to do it. Parents are not allowed to do it for them in any capacity. Your team should also know, whether it's during impound or during competition, that they're not going to be allowed to use power tools of any kind. And actually, for any tool, if the event supervisor thinks that the student is not using it safely, they can tell them they're not allowed to use it. So they should be bringing tools that they know how to operate themselves in a safe manner, and they can't be power tools. Some other things related to the testing. So let's say that you have, two students who are submitting a scrambler device. Anyone from their team can impound it for them if they like have to run and do something else. That's fine. But the builders of the device should be the ones that are there and operating their vehicle during their session time. And obviously, this is because they know how it works best. They can answer questions about it. If you do have one of the builders absent, but you leave them on the roster, you could have another student sub in to help the partner test it if that's needed, but it's expected that then the original partner like was a part of the build. Okay. And I know for many teams, like it's not just two people building a device, it's maybe multiple from the team. So that shouldn't be an issue. But we need to have at least one of the builders present for operation of the device and to answer these questions. If we think that they aren't there, if it's two people who have no idea how the device works, we may ask to talk to some other students on the team. There could be a number of penalties that come from that, all the way up to disqualification. And we never want that to happen. Okay. So that's just something I would encourage you to check in on and ask as a coach about like who's built what, who's ready to test what, and make sure that they know all the implications of these policies. I mentioned already that parents are not allowed to construct anything on competition devices, but there are some other key things that I would suggest sharing with the parents of your team. And these policies are all on our website on the policies tab. We do have an entire policy about parent participation. So in addition to not being allowed to construct anything, they also are not allowed to test anything, assemble anything, calibrate anything at any time. So if we see a parent doing that at the tournament, that can be grounds for immediate disqualification from the event for that team. Okay. And they shouldn't be doing it anyway, right? Like they didn't build it. They also should not enter the competition area at tournaments. So especially for the build events, there's usually caution tape put up that they shouldn't cross. Testing rooms for the written tests, like they shouldn't enter those rooms. They shouldn't interfere with an event in any way. They shouldn't be talking to the event supervisor. And they also shouldn't be talking to the students during the competition. They can't offer advice. They can't offer coaching. There will be penalties assessed for that. A huge one is they are not allowed to touch or take pictures of another team's devices. If it's their own kid's device, they can take pictures, they could take video, but don't be surprised if the event supervisor asks to confirm, hey, is this your kid or is this your team? They'll ask the students, like, is that your mom? Is that your grandfather? To make sure that it really is their team's people that are recording it in whatever fashion. Okay. So absolutely prohibited to do that for any other team's devices, but with permission can do it for their own. Parents should also not be talking to us with Vaso directly. If they have questions or concerns, they should funnel them through you. You may be able to answer quite a few of them. And if not, then you can represent the team and ask them to us. All right. Are there any questions about the policy stuff that I just went over? Representing my wait time for those of you that are teachers. Okay. Again, all the policies are found on our website. Can we have food in the Anderson Center? Yes, and I actually will talk about the fact that UMW will be selling concessions. So yes, you can have food in the Anderson Center. We just ask that you clean up after yourselves. Okay. Other things with device testing. I mentioned that students need to bring a writing utensil to impound or just to device testing in general. And here's why. They have to fill out this like top portion of the checklist that the event supervisors will be using. And the reason why I have this in this particular part of the presentation are the questions at the bottom of it. Used a kit and used a 3D printer, laser cutter, CNC mill, etc. It is absolutely fine to say answer yes to those questions. Okay, so I'm just letting you know, like they can use kits, they can use a 3D printer, they can use a laser cutter, etc., as long as they've done it appropriately. However, there are going to be some follow-up questions that are asked when those like are indicated about, you know, like what design was used in the 3D printing, how the kit was substantially modified, right? For events that aren't helicopter, we expect that there are substantial modifications to kits. That's one of the VASO clarifications. So those questions will just guide the conversation that the event supervisor has with the students to make sure they're asking the right things. Okay. The checklists that we use, that we print out for our event supervisors, are available on the VASO resources page and on each of the individual event pages. Would strongly encourage you to take a look at those, have your teams print them out. They can practice judging each other using them so that they know exactly like how they're going to be evaluated on tournament day. I think that's a great pre-tournament exercise. And like I said, it's the literal exact page that we use. VASO modifies and makes our own checklist so you know exactly what we're going to have in front of us. Another key reminder, because I know at this tournament in particular, we have a number of teams that have traveled and gone to a variety of invitationals. Just because a device passed an invitational, like passed the construction checks, doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be deemed compliant for regionals. And this could be for a number of reasons. One, things can change over time, right? With changes in temperature, there could be, you know, if it was built months ago, a lot of stuff has happened in the weather since then. So it could just no longer be compliant. Or it could be that, you know, we're more strict in our judging at regionals, our judges are more highly trained. So just prepare your teams, like encourage them to use those checklists so that they can remeasure and make sure that everything will be compliant within those construction parameters. Okay, so they've tested their device, they answered all the questions of the event supervisor, they're done with their session. They can take their device with them back to the home base, back to a car, back to a bus, etc. The only time we don't want them to take it with them is if they intend to file an appeal. In that instance, they should leave the device with the supervisors. Appeals can be filed for any event, but in the case of a device event, it's very important that the device is left with the event supervisors. Appeals are one of the main things that you as coaches may do in the coach portal on tournament day. So only coaches and event supervisors can initiate appeals. High school student leadership accounts cannot on the portal. Parents cannot, mentors cannot. No competitor can initiate appeals. Okay. But what appeals encapsulate is essentially when there's a question either by the team or by the event supervisor about a ruling, there's a way that we can submit that into our appeals portal, and we have a team of people who handle these appeals, looking back through the rules, discussing the rules, you know, looking back at devices, etc., to come up with a fair ruling based on the information available. So these are filed online via the coach portal. There's a button that says Tournament Day Appeals, and when you click that, you'll see that there's actually a place where you can confirm your contact info. So appeals, when they're updated, it'll actually send you an email. And then also sometimes our appeals people may have to give you a call if we can't find you, especially in a tournament where we're in like multiple buildings. A phone call is probably more likely than us walking over to the Anderson Center to try to find you. So please make sure that information is updated. But when you click on that appeals button, there is an option to do that. Also, then you'll see this message that kind of goes through what the expectation is around appeals. Okay, so we acknowledge that mistakes can happen, and we know that your role as a coach is to advocate for your students. So let's say a student tests a device or something happens in a written test and the students come to you and say, we think that, this ruling or this question or this measurement or whatever didn't follow the rules, wasn't done according to the rules. Okay. You, as the coach, are expected to then sit down with the students, look at the rules. So if hopefully you would have it either printed out or you can have it handy on your device, so that you reread the event rules and any relevant clarifications from the VASA website for that event. Okay. We're not asking coaches preemptively to understand and know every single rule of Science Olympiad because, like, spoiler alert, like even I would not say that I know every single little rule. But when they come to you with an appeal question, sit down, open the rule book, figure it out together with the students. Okay. And then the questions that's going to ask you are like, when was this event? What was the event? Did you leave the device in impound if it was a device event? What rule do you think was violated? What's your suggestion of how to fix it, etc. Okay. So that then gets submitted. Our appeals team looks at it, and then they take over and will come up with a ruling, whether they, overturn a ruling. If they agree with the initial ruling, you'll know one way or the other. Here are some important things about what a successful appeal looks like. Successful appeals have to allege that we broke a rule or that your team's testing conditions were substantially different from other teams. This does not mean saying, hey, that other team got to do this other thing. We're not like writing appeals about other teams. Okay. Instead, it would be, during this testing session, this thing happened to my team that was not, was not consistent throughout the day. Those are pretty rare, honestly. But the breaking a rule one, or like a ruling that we think like is not consistent with the rule book, is more what we're looking for. What is not an acceptable appeal would be things like, we didn't know about this rule doesn't apply to us, the event was too hard, things like that. Okay. And the final thing to note about appeals is that they have to be filed within an hour of your team finishing the event in question. So there is a timeliness factor to this. So this is why it's important that you're available, even if you're volunteering in a session, like, so if someone knows how to get in contact with you, or if you have someone else who has a coach wristband that can do this on your behalf. We don't expect a large volume of appeals, and we don't normally have that. So for those of you that are new coaches, don't think that you're going to be filing like 7 different appeals. That would be crazy. Okay. But like we said, things happen, and we want to have a system to be prepared for that. Okay, so we really only talked about like one relatively small chunk of this schedule, which is like before 9 a.m. and then like all the builds at the bottom. But we have like the other, 18 events to briefly cover. And I would strongly encourage you, if you haven't watched the like reading the rules videos as a coach, would really like encourage you to do that. And your students can too, to make sure that they understand like the individual nature of these events. But I am going to give some like broad reminders. But from 9 a.m. to like, 5 p.m., like we're just doing events all day. And so those event times are determined by team number, except for the ones that you self-schedule. So please make sure that you know what your team number is. You can see that in the portal so you can read the schedule appropriately. We do not move teams to different sessions to accommodate late arriving participants, event conflicts, etc. Okay, so that's one of the big jobs, I think, as a coach in advance, is making sure that there are no conflicts, that everyone's schedule is possible for them to do without being in 2 places at once. Most events are going to utilize the full session block of time, other than, those device events that I talked about, that would mainly be 15 minutes, but especially all the written events and the lab events, they should expect that to take the whole time. So they should plan to be there at the start of the session to receive instructions. If they come late to a session, they could still be allowed in, but they won't get to make up that time. If one partner is there and the other's not, a partner can start without the other one. Again, they just don't get to make up the time for it. But we've left like 15 minutes in between sessions, which should really be more than enough time for them to navigate within the Jepson building, which is where all the full session events are. It's only a couple stories high. Okay, I always feel like a broken record at this point of the presentation, but it is so, so important that teams are reading their rules, and bringing only the allowed materials, binders, note sheets, etc. There are important details for each event, and again, depending on the level of student you're working with and your like role as a coach and how you've defined that, that could be something that your students are doing, or that could be something that you're facilitating. But like some events require allow you to have a cheat sheet. Some say one per participant, others say one per team. If they're allowed to have a binder, right? That like things have to be in the holes in the rings, what type of calculators they're allowed to have, etc. All of that is unique to each event and is listed at the top of the event pages. Please make sure they bring a writing utensil to all the events, and like I said, to impound as well. And then a final note here, for Write It Do It. This is the only regional where we have it. We're very excited. Supplies for Write It Do It are provided and packaged by Vaso, so you are not going to have to like bring anything for that. They really do just need a pencil for the writer. So I guess this is the one instance where someone doesn't need to bring a pencil if they're the doer. There's a lot in all of the rules for these individual events. Please don't just rely on me or Karen, who made the reading the rules video. It's really important that students know how to seek out this information for themselves by reading the website, reading the rules, reading those checklists that we post. There are other resources that we post online, and especially those clarifications for events. There are a good number of clarifications for builds and non-builds that we do enforce at Vaso tournaments, so they should be aware of those. I mentioned calculators, and I just wanted to point out in the rule book that there is a calculator class description page. It's page 72 in the C book and page 71 in the B book. And there are 4 classes of calculator, and it says at the top of any rules page, like what class they're allowed to have for an event. So this is just something to highlight because a lot of students nowadays have graphing calculators, but that's only allowed in certain events. So they can't just assume they're allowed to use that for any of the events. That's a class 3 calculator. So if something's a class 2 event, they couldn't use their TI-83. Instead, they could only use a scientific calculator like a TI-30X. However, if they only have a 4-function calculator, which is a class 1, they could bring that and use that in a class 2 event. But just making sure that they know the differences there. And there's only one event that allows a class 4, and that's astronomy. It's their laptop, and there's some other parameters around that, but no student should be expecting to use their phone as a calculator. If we see that they have a phone in an event, for whatever reason, if it's out, they can be disqualified from that event. So event supervisors can either have them put them in the front of the room or have them store them away, but they are never allowed to use the calculator on their phone. Chemistry events have their own additional requirements. So in Division B, we're talking about crime busters and potions and poisons. In Division C, we're talking chem lab, forensics, and materials science. So in these events, students complete a paper-based test and also a hands-on lab portion. And if you're in material science, also a puck drop during their assigned session. Students are required to bring the necessary safety equipment, or they will not be allowed in the testing room. So for all the other ones, like let's say they don't have a calculator, or they don't have a binder of notes, or whatever it is, that's fine. They're at a disadvantage, but they can come in and do the event. If they don't have their goggles and aprons or lab coats for these events, they cannot come in the room. Okay. So even if they think like, oh, I just want to do the lab portion. Nope. You can't come in the room if you don't have your safety equipment. There's also a separate equipment page for these chemistry events that is like encouraged materials, not necessarily they're not required. And I'll show you what that looks like too, because these are like kits that students might be curating to bring with them on tournament day. So on page 71 in the C book and page 70 in the B book, there's a table that looks like this is the one for C. The B one is similar with just different events listed. Anything marked with an X in a column for an event is a item that students are permitted to bring with them for lab portions. they're not required to bring everything with an X. In fact, I would suggest that, especially for events like Forensics and Crime Busters, they definitely don't need all the things with an X. So as they've been practicing, they can curate their kit of like the things that they know they'll use. But pay attention to the differences in the chem events. So, for example, for chemistry lab, you're allowed to bring graduated cylinders, but forensics, you're not. So, you can't just necessarily use the same kit for all the events. Also, when it says like graduated cylinders 10 to 100, that doesn't mean you have to bring one of every size. It just means you can bring any like sizes in this range. Same is true for beakers. Okay. So, if the students don't bring a kit of materials of some kind, they will be at a disadvantage in the chemistry events, but they are still allowed to compete as long as they have the safety equipment. Depending on your role as a teacher, this may be something that you are in charge of, or you may have kits from years past. I would just double check them to make sure that they, match this year's rules, especially for potions and poisons and material science, which just rotated in. So, like I mentioned, they have to have their safety equipment, even if they come with nothing else. For the chem events, they have to have safety equipment. So we have a personal protective equipment guide that we put together on the VASO webpage. It's also listed in a similar fashion in the rule book. But they must, for the chem events, have what are called Category C goggles, which are the like indirect vented chemical splash protection goggles. So the ones on the left here are the ones we're talking about. They need to be fitting to the face. They need to have the indirect vents. The vents on these ones are black. They don't necessarily have to be. They might be like clear and colorless, depending on the make of the goggle, but they have to have those indirect vents. They cannot have those open holes like the ones on the right-hand side. Those are not allowed. Okay. Depending on your school system or what goggles your team already has, chances are the chemical splash goggles may also have the Z87 plus rating that is required for the build events. So I know at least in Fairfax County, our goggles, you could use the school goggles for every event, and that would be just fine. But please check them and make sure that they have the correct rating for their use in build events, and they have the correct like face fitting parameters for the chemistry events. They're also required to dress appropriately for the event. So for the chemistry events, this requires like sleeves down to the wrist, long pants, closed-toed shoes, hair pulled back. All of that's listed in the like chemistry event rule pages. One of the main ones I want to point out though is they're not allowed to wear super tight pants. They're not allowed to wear leggings. And for anyone who's not a chemistry person, like there's a reason for that. If something spills on them, if that fabric's tight to their skin, then it's immediately going to be in contact with their skin. Something looser, they would have a chance to remove before being in contact with their skin. So no leggings. If they want to like bring something to change into, if leggings are an important part of their fit for tournament day, that's fine, but they just need to have other pants to wear during the session. Same thing with like the long sleeves, just make sure they have those. If they have a lab coat, that can take care of the long sleeves for them. If they're wearing an apron, then they need to have a long sleeve shirt on underneath. And again, long hair pulled back, especially for those events that have like open flames like forensics. The aprons that we're talking about, we're looking like at not like a kitchen apron, but ideally ones that are like chemical resistant, or rubberized that like goes to at least the knee. They need to have their like lap covered. Okay. All right, so I know that's a lot of information. It doesn't all have to live with you. I encourage you to, put some of that on your students, again, depending on the age group that they can be responsible for many of these things. But you decide, how you distribute that responsibility. All that we're focusing on from the VASO point of view is at the beginning of the tournament, you're the one that's checking in. You're the one that we're giving the wristbands to. You're confirming the rosters. During the tournament, you're as available as possible to your team and families if they have questions. From the VASO perspective, you're the only ones that can file appeals. And then, of course, just like the fun part of it, like you could watch your team compete, right, in all those build events. After the tournament is done, we expect that you help facilitate, your team cleanup. And then we hope you stay for the award ceremony. But through all of this, like you are the team connection to Vaso. We will share contact info with you directly for how you can connect with us on tournament day if the need arises. We usually have like a Google phone number. And we also, like I said, have the headquarters space that you can come see us at. Okay. But don't hesitate to reach out with questions, especially in the days leading up to the tournaments. I'm here to help. And hopefully, like the resources we've posted have given you a lot of what you need to. Okay, so we've made it to the end, the awards ceremony. This will be in Dodd Auditorium. You'll see it on the UMW map when I share the full link to it. It's a little bit further down on campus, but it's an awesome space. And so my plan right now is to have it as a combined award ceremony. I'm confirming how many people can fit in the Dodd Auditorium just to make sure I'm not setting us up for disaster. But that's my plan at the moment. Like I said, I've got an email out to the UMW people just to check. I also don't really know like how many teams may not necessarily stick around in full. But the plan is award ceremony at 6:30 for B and C. And just to make sure everyone knows going in what to expect. So since this was the National Ready Regional, this is a little different, right, than some of the other tournaments in a couple different ways. We're giving more medals. We're giving more trophies, and we have some differences in the bids to state. So when we set up the National Ready Regional, we had said any teams that had placed in the top 5 at state, if they came to the Mary Washington Regional, they would automatically have a bid to the state tournament. And so of the 5 in C, all 5 accepted. And of the 5 in B, 3 of them accepted. And so that drove our decision making about the medals and the trophies in the respective divisions. So that's why they look a little different. So in Division B, we are awarding medals for the top 7 in each event. And in C, we're awarding medals for the top 9. For trophies in Division B, we are awarding for the top 5 schools. And for Division C, we're awarding for the top 6 schools. In addition to the 3 B schools that already have their automatic bids, 6 additional schools will qualify from this tournament in Division B for the state tournament. And 3 additional Division C schools will qualify in addition to the 5 that have automatic bids. This is proportional with the number that are coming from the other regionals once you take out the automatic bid team. So it is the same pretty much across the board in terms of those odds. When we say that schools qualify for the state tournament, what we mean is that it is the school. It's not necessarily an individual team. Individual students do not qualify. It's based on the overall tournament place of a school's highest placing team, and you're only compared to other teams at this regional. Okay. If your school does qualify, you are not required to send the students on the team that won the qualifying place. You could send a team of 15 entirely new students from your school. So there's no this person got a first place and a second place in this event, and so I have to keep them on the state team kind of thing. Like those decisions lie with you as the coach. Okay. There is one exception, which is our gold bid policy for how individual students can, in a way, qualify for the state tournament. And so I'll just go over that again. Last year, we did this for the first time. It was a lot of fun. We were excited to do it again. We've already had some gold bids from the tournaments that have happened the prior 2 weekends. So if a school does not qualify for the state tournament, but they happen to have a team that takes first place in an event, we invite the specific students for that event to come to the state tournament and compete in it. They don't take away medals at the state tournament from the other teams. It just means that we might award 2 second places, 2 third places, etc. And here's the example that is from our gold bid policy. This was done in Michigan a couple years ago, that They had this particular school did not qualify for the state tournament, but they happened to have taken first place in experimental design at their regional. They came to the state tournament, they competed, and they earned second place. But you'll see that another competing school also earned second place. So those teams vying for national spots aren't hurt by the gold bids. One thing I want to highlight with this is that there are no substitutions. So if Ryan, Chris, and Lauren were the three students on your experimental design team and they qualify for a gold bid, only Ryan, Chris, and Lauren can compete. If Lauren can't make it, Ryan and Chris can do it, but they can't bring a sub. So that is the only way in which individual students get essentially invited to the state tournament, but there's nothing beyond the state tournament for them. There's no way for them to get to nationals as individuals. That's teams only. Before anybody asks, I also do want to say about the nationals bids, we don't know yet. Um, Nationals hasn't even asked us how many teams have registered. So they will compile all that information from us. We usually find out by like April 1st about if we have one or two national bids. So that shouldn't be on many people's minds yet, but I just wanted to put that out there. Okay, after all of it is done, you will be able to see the full awards on Duosmium after the tournament. This is just an example from last year's Fairfax Regional. So you can see the full placings, 1 through 30, for every team in every event. And if you have never really perused Duosmium, you totally should. You can really go down a rabbit hole looking at the history of pretty much every team. I think like Virginia, so one of the creators of Duosmium is from Virginia, and we have like a good chunk of our past tournaments on it. So it is kind of fun to go down like memory lane a little bit. But we will share the link with you after the tournament for the regional results. All right, and finally, UMW concessions and lunch. So I mentioned earlier that the Anderson Center, you're allowed to have food, and part of that is because they have concession stands. So UMW Dining Services will be running a concession stand starting at 8 a.m. until 2:30. They're going to have things like coffee and hot tea, muffins, Danish, for in the morning. So parents may be interested in that. They'll have other snack items. More around like the lunchtime, they're gonna have like pretzels and nachos. But they also will have a lunch pre-order. I'm just waiting to get the link from them, but I have the details of what it'll be. Um, you can choose to do this like for individual students, or you could order as a team. It doesn't matter to us, but the bag lunches are going to be like you can get a hot dog, a cheeseburger, or 2 slices of pizza. I think the options are cheese or pepperoni. And then they also get a cookie and a bag of chips and a soda or water, and all of that together is $10. So like I said, as soon as I have the link, I will share that with you guys. I was just in communication with them today about that. And like I said, you can send this out to parents, like they can do it. We just ask that they like keep their receipt or print it, or just like have a picture of it on their phone so that we can easily identify your order at pickup. If you order lunch as a team, how would you pay? So, I mean, you'd be able to pay by card. You could, because it's a pre-order. So, you'd be like ordering it through UMW Dining Services, and you just check out a credit card from your finance officer and be able to just order it all at once you've collected the order from your students. So you would need to do that in advance to know like what they want, or just purchase a selection that they could then choose from the day of. So whichever works for your team, but I will have the link to share, hopefully in the next day. Okay, I feel like that was a ton of information. I also know that for this particular tournament, I benefit greatly from having a lot of veteran teams. So what other questions do you guys have? Headquarters on tournament day, where you can probably find me, is the Convergence Center. So it's where Bungee Drop will take place. And then like downstairs, there's going to be the headquarters. I'll also probably be around. Also, like fun fact, so I never did Science Olympiad when I was a competitor, or when I was a student. I competed in other things like academic decathlon. But so because of that, no one in my family has like really ever seen Science Olympiad. I've roped my brother in to doing it in recent years. He's written for a number of our events. But my sister and both my parents are coming to this tournament. So I'll also probably be out and about showing them what Science Olympiad is all about because they've never seen it. So if you are looking for me, I might be in headquarters, but I will probably also be spending a good chunk of time in Gulrick and in the Science Center. Question in the chat. Helicopter is not an impound for Division B. Correct. Helicopter is not an impound event. It is also an event that you are not required to significantly alter a kit for. Just thinking about other VASO clarifications. The schedule for all events is available right now. So if you go onto the tournament page on the portal, then actually, I think I might have it. I can pull it up for you here. Is it going to let me do that? No, it doesn't want me to go to my other screen. Sorry. If you go to the tournament, like the coach portal, there's a tournament details tab. If you click on that, you can like there's a link directly to the tournament schedule that's been up there. I haven't changed anything about it. I will populate it with rooms here in the next few days. But that's already there. And then obviously the only other information you'd have to like provide teams is what times you've signed up for their build events. Okay. Do we need to reserve a separate time slot for device testing, or can we use the same time slot booked for the building event? So booking a time slot for the build event is the time for the device test. That is the build event, yeah. And just to make sure everyone's clear, Wind Power does not have a separate sign up. We are doing the device testing for Wind Power during the written test block, just like Nationals does. Other questions? Okay. Thanks for tuning in. Those of you that are live, thanks for watching. If you're watching this recorded, this is far from the last time you will hear from me before the regional tournament. We'll be in communication a number of times with, I'll let you know when I put room numbers in the schedule. I'll let you know about the pre-order for the lunches. I'm going to share the slides from this call. I'm going to share the recording, and we'll have other details as well. But I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in Fredericksburg. It's going to be a great tournament, and I'll see you March 1st.